Please welcome Alabama author James Douglas.
The title of the book is JFK and the Unspeakable: Why He Died and Why It Matters. It's what Gandhi would have called an experiment in truth. I just came from a workshop with a retreat actually with Arun Gandhi, Gandhi's grandson, and I'm going back to it in a little while, so I'm very much in the midst of Gandhi right now. And an experiment in truth is an effort to discover the truth regardless of the consequences, to deepen in it, and to try to live it out. This experiment in truth started actually 41 years ago when I was a professor of religion at the University of Hawaii and Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, which changed my life because the students in our little course on the theology of peace burned their draft cards, went to jail for periods ranging from 6 months to 2 years, invited me into their group, Mr. Professor of Nonviolence, put up or shut up. And when I joined their group, it was the beginning of the end of my academic career. And I was in jail that spring also because we sat in front of a troop convoy at the University of Hawaii of young men who were about to kill and be killed in Vietnam in a terribly unjust war. It was my baptism into a whole different way of life. I tried to catch up to it over the next 30 to 40 years as during the time I was a peace and justice activist and an author. In the 90s, I began to catch up to it by attending the only trial ever held for the assassination of Martin Luther King in Memphis, Tennessee, in which a jury of 6 black and 6 white jurors declared Dr. King, in a wrongful death lawsuit initiated by Coretta Scott King, was indeed assassinated by a conspiracy that included U.S. government agencies. It's explicitly in their verdict. The analogy to President Kennedy's assassination was very strong, so it became an experiment into the truth in the 1990s for me of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and John and Robert Kennedy. So this book is the first part of it, which has required 12 years of my life. Shelley, my wife, has figured out that if I continue at this rate, I'll conclude at the age of 95. She says, you might want to speed it up a little, Jim. So it's the story, as I understand it, from those years of research and through hundreds of thousands of documents that have now been made public thanks to the Oliver Stone film and the JFK Records Act, which was became law in 1992. There's an entire building in College Park, Maryland, that is devoted to documents on the Kennedy assassination, his whole administration. That's the basis for the book, as well as interviews with a very large number of people. The story, as I understand it, is that John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, were terrified by what they had done and tried, by Kennedy reaching out to Khrushchev at the most terrible and critical moment, and Khrushchev extending a hand and grasping Kennedy's, they decided to back away from the horror that had created by the Cold War. And during the next 13 months, they began to work together. Kennedy gave an impassioned speech June 10, 1963 at American University, which he called for an end to the Cold War. He then signed a nuclear test ban treaty with Nikita Khrushchev. He then began secret negotiations with Fidel Castro to normalize relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, between the U.S. and Cuba, and he then signed a national security memorandum to withdraw U.S. troops from Vietnam. As a result, he was assassinated by his own national security state. Why? That's the why. Why does it matter? Because the same story is happening right now with the current president. Right now. It's exactly the same story. Unless we catch up to that story, it's going to have exactly the same conclusion. So my hope is that by learning this story, by deepening in our understanding of it, we will have a different conclusion. We will have a resurrection to that crucifixion, and that resurrection will be our commitment to move out ahead of this president, so that he will not be isolated as President Kennedy was in an analogous situation, and that we can support and be ahead in such a way as to give faith and time and hope, as in the title of Mayor Arrington's book, Hope for Our World and Hope for Ourselves. If there is a Kennedy assassination, and if we're not to have a recurrence of it, we have to be the resurrection. Thank you.